One line of long text can break a grid that survived 1,000 code reviews, and the culprit is one forgotten default. Stick around and you will know exactly why grid items refuse to shrink and the single line that fixes it. Here is the question worth holding on to. Why does a browser make a grid item bigger than its own column? Picture a card layout. 3 columns, equal width, clean in the design file, perfect with short placeholder labels. Then a real user pastes in a product name 40 characters long, and the whole row stretches off the page. That is not a bug in your code. It is the specification behaving exactly as written since 2017. Every grid item has, by default, a minimum width set to auto, not to 0, not to the column size. Auto means the item will never shrink smaller than its own content, whatever the grid track says. So one unbroken string, a file name, a URL, forces the whole column to grow to fit it. The one fraction unit you defined becomes a polite suggestion, not a rule the browser is forced to obey. This single rule is called the automatic minimum size, and it lives quietly inside the CSS Grid specification. The World Wide Web Consortium published that rule in Module 1, and almost nobody reads Module 1. Firefox, Chrome, and Safari all implement it identically, which is rare enough in browser history to notice. So this is not a bug you can blame on one vendor. Every modern browser agrees on this behavior. It exists for a good reason too. Without it, images and buttons would shrink to nothing and disappear. Let me tell you about a support dashboard I worked on in 2021. It used a 3-column grid. Column 1 held customer names. Column 2 held ticket status. Column 3 held the ticket summary text. In staging, every summary was short. Lorem ipsum, testing, done. The grid looked flawless in every review. In production, one customer wrote a 90-word paragraph with no spaces, describing an error code. That single row pushed the summary column past the edge of the screen, and it dragged the table with it. Support agents on smaller laptops couldn't see the status column at all. Tickets got missed for 2 days. Nobody had touched the CSS. Nobody had deployed anything. The content itself was the deploy that broke it. That is the trap. Grid layouts pass code review looking at code, not at the words someone will eventually type. The fix took 4 minutes once we found it. Finding it took most of an afternoon. Let's talk about the fraction unit, because most developers misread what it actually promises you. Grid template columns, 1 for a 1 for a 1 for a, does not mean equal width no matter what. It means equal leftover space. Leftover space is calculated after the browser satisfies every item's minimum content size first. If one column's content refuses to shrink, there is less leftover space to distribute, and your FR units lie to you. This is the part nobody puts in the tutorial. FR units are last in line, not first. The browser sizes intrinsic content, then images, then fixed tracks, and only then divides what remains as fractions. So when your long content column keeps growing, it is not stealing space. It was simply served first. You can test this in under a minute. Open DevTools, paste a long unbroken word into any grid cell. Watch the column widen even though you swore in the CSS that both columns were exactly equal fractions. That demo is worth doing on a real project, not just a code pen, because production content is always weirder. Now, Flexbox has the exact same disease, and people are shocked every single time. Flex items also default to min width auto along the main axis for the identical specification reason. A flex row with 3 equal children will happily let one child balloon past its share if its text is long. This means switching from grid to Flexbox does not save you. The underlying rule travels with you. I have seen teams migrate an entire layout system chasing this bug, never realizing it was one property away. The rule follows the box model, not the display mode. That's the detail that gets missed in most guides. Even table layout, the oldest CSS layout mode we have, behaves this way for the same historical reason. Long, unbreakable content has always fought against fixed width columns. Grid just made the fight more visible. Nested grids make this worse because the minimum size problem compounds one level at a time. A parent grid gives a child grid a track width. That child grid then runs its own sizing algorithm inside it. If the child contains one stubborn long string, it can force its own width beyond what the parent allotted. The parent then has to either overflow or grow, and growing usually means blowing out your whole page layout. Subgrid, added to browsers around 2023, does not fix this. It inherits track sizes, not content behavior. So Subgrid solves alignment problems beautifully, but it will not save you from one ugly unbroken string of text. People assume newer CSS features quietly patch old defaults. They almost never do. Defaults are sticky on purpose. Changing a decades-old default would break millions of existing pages overnight, so the specification simply never touches it. Here's the first real fix, and it is unglamorous. Set min-width 0 on your grid and flex items. That one declaration overrides the automatic minimum, telling the browser it is allowed to shrink content below its natural size. Once min-width is 0, the browser will finally clip, wrap, or scroll the content instead of blowing out the layout. But 0 alone isn't enough if the content is one continuous string with nowhere natural to break. That's where overflow-wrap breakword, or the newer overflow-wrap anywhere, earns its place in your style sheet. Breakword waits for a natural gap first. Anywhere will cut a word apart mid-letter if it truly must. For genuinely unbreakable strings, like a long transaction hash, word break breakall is the blunt tool that actually works. Combine those two properties with min-width 0, and the 90-word paragraph story I told you earlier never happens. None of these 3 lines are exotic. They've existed in browsers since roughly 2015. Nobody just remembers them. So the fix isn't a framework, isn't a rewrite. It is 3 lines most teams never learned to reach for. Now, the second real fix, which handles the column itself, not just the text inside it. Replace a bare one far with minmax of 0 and 1 for in your grid template columns declaration. Minmax 0 1 far tells the browser the column's floor is 0, overriding that stubborn automatic minimum entirely. Without minmax, 1 fr silently means minmax auto 1 fr, which is exactly the trap from the start of this video. That's the part almost no tutorial states plainly. The shorthand you're using already hides a minimum you didn't choose. Autofit and autofill grid patterns fail for this exact reason constantly, and developers blame the wrong property. Swap every 1 far for minmax of 0, 1 fr, and entire categories of layout bugs quietly stop existing. It costs you nothing. Layouts that already worked keep working. Layouts that were secretly broken start behaving. I now write it as a personal rule. Never ship a bare far unit without minmax wrapped around it. That single habit has saved me more debugging hours than any tool, linter, or framework upgrade I've adopted. Here's the harder problem though. Bugs like this rarely show up while you're the one testing the page. Developers type short test data. Real users paste real names, real addresses, real error messages nobody planned for. So the second fix is procedural, not technical. Stop testing layouts with lorem ipsum and short placeholder strings. Grab the longest real value from your actual production database and paste it straight into your staging environment. 1 unbroken German compound word, 1 long email address, 1 URL with tracking parameters will expose 90% of these bugs. Some teams keep a small file of nightmare strings for exactly this purpose. A long word, an emoji, a right-to-left string. Paste that file into every new component before it ships. It takes 90 seconds and it catches what code review misses. This is cheaper than automated visual regression testing, and it catches the exact bug those tools often miss. Visual regression tools compare screenshots. If your test data never had long content, the screenshot never shows the failure. So the tooling isn't wrong. The test data is the gap, and it is a gap almost every team has. Now, a small history detour because it explains why this default exists at all and won't be changing. Before CSS Grid, In the era of floats, the same shrink-to-fit fight existed, just with uglier, more manual workarounds. Developers used table layout fixed back then to force columns to obey widths, ignoring content entirely. Overflow be damned. Grid's designers looked at that history and chose content awareness as the default, favoring readability over strict geometry. That's a defensible choice. It just means the responsibility for handling extreme content shifted from the browser to you. The browser assumes you want to see your content. It just doesn't know you wanted a fixed column more. Once you know the trade-off was made on purpose, the workaround stops feeling like a hack and starts feeling intentional. You are not fighting the browser when you write min width 0. You are simply making the intentional choice yourself. So, back to the question I opened with. Why does a browser make an item bigger than its own column? Because by default, it trusts your content more than it trusts your layout, and nobody ever told it otherwise. Now you can tell it otherwise, in 3 small lines, before the next long paragraph finds your grid in production.